All right. Hey guys. Hey gang. How you doing? Once again, I'm having all sorts of audio issues this morning. You know, it's one of those things you test and it works all week, and then it stops working, and well, there you go. It just stops working and is what it is. All right. Well, we'll get going. Hello to Matt. Looks like you're the only one on. And let's get going on it. So we'll do this, and then we'll talk some questions at the end. I really want to address folks who have been stuck. Here I'm talking to intermediate guitar players. Have you ever felt that you're stuck in the same position? You're playing the same licks over and over. And something I've felt, and it's something that a lot of intermediate players feel. And I've seen it over and over again. I've been playing for 50 years, over 50 years now, sad to say. I've been teaching for 40 years, and I see it over and over again. It can be overcome. And so we're going to talk about that today. I totally get it, though. I was there. I've seen many students be there, and we're going to talk about how to overcome it today. So let's start with something that most of us, or maybe all of us, already know, and that is and by the way, I should just say also that this can be very overwhelming for people. I totally get it. I totally get it. It can be overwhelming for people. So so what we're going to do today is whoops, take that off. There we go. What we're going to do today is to kind of get beyond some of that stuff, and let's start out by what most of us probably already know, and that's the minor pentatonic box, right? This sort of thing. Now, why do we all know that one, right? We all know it for a number of different reasons. Probably it's the first thing that we learned. It's something that our heroes play, right? It's something that we know a lot of licks out of. And we know a ton of licks out of that position. And it's also something that is comfortable to our fingers. So, for example, if we're used to playing rock, we have to bend a lot, right? So we're bending with the third finger. The typical bends are with the third finger on that. And, for all of those reasons, it's probably pretty familiar to us. And my guess is you can already visualize it. Something like this, right? You can already visualize that. I'm going to just turn that off there so you can see. You can probably already visualize that perfectly without having to really struggle, right? Let me just shrink that down a bit. Without really having to struggle. You see that box and you can play it. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to be able to play all over the neck in the same sort of way, to be able to visualize it and be able to play as easily as we can play that box. So I'm going to show you how to do that today and get you on the path to do it. Now, I won't BS you. This is not something that you can do in 10 minutes, right? There's a lot of videos out there that show you, well, learn these 6 notes and you'll be a guitar god. That's not one of these videos. This is showing you kind of a direct way to do it, but it's totally worth it. Now, what not to do is memorize, okay? What you don't want to do is take out a sheet of paper like this and just memorize these patterns and say, okay, what are the scale positions? And this is done for the modes, but you could easily do it for the you can easily do it for the pentatonic scales as well. But what you don't want to do is memorize. That just doesn't work. I've seen people try to memorize these sorts of things with flashcards. Just doesn't work. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to take an approach that's going to be very musical. So it all starts with something that you already know. So we are going to start out with this pattern that we already know, and I'll show you how to extend it, but we're going to extend it in a smart way. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to be able to, well, let me show you what we want to do, and then listen in and see if you can see what I'm doing here, okay? Okay, without getting any into all sorts of details, what I did was I made it musical. And I started by, you can do this with a backing track, that's totally fine. But I just did it by playing a little riff in the beginning to try and make it kind of musical, right? You know, and just playing that way. And it's important to make all these scales just kind of musical to be able to play things that come out when you're trying to improvise. If you're only playing or memorizing scale patterns, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. All right. So the second thing is at that point, once we're used to playing that musically, and you probably are, but maybe you're not, then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next pattern. Now I'm going to show it to you in just a second. We're going to move up the neck to the next pattern. Now I'm going to show it to you, but that's not the only thing. Again, it's not just memorizing. Here's the second pattern. This is, some people call this pattern 2. And that's, again, this is not going to be the whole story yet. You're going to have to wait till the end to see the whole story and be able to get move appropriately from one to the other. But a lot of people call this pattern 2. Here was pattern 1, and here's pattern 2. Okay, now, the idea is, of course, you're going to have to play through it a couple times. Okay, so here's the question. I find that a lot of people can visualize that first pattern, but they can't visualize that second pattern. Why? Well, here's my take on it. When we have the first pattern, let me get to this. Let me get to the second thing here. When we have the first pattern, we already know that there's an A minor chord right there, and it's easy for us to see that A minor chord. And so all of these things that are with the shape, or are tangential with the shape, you see in green I've got that A minor chord, but it's an E minor shape. Okay? All of these notes you can see in relation to that E minor chord, that E minor shaped chord, right? So that when we're playing this, it's easy to see. It's easy to see that. However, when we go to the next one, this one, we can't see that chord embedded in there. Well, there is a chord that's embedded in there. It's just a different shape. It's one that we're not as familiar with. but it's helpful to take a look at the shape. And here it is right here. It's actually a D minor shape. So this would be the D minor, would be the chord that you would play in the open position, where the root is on the B string. I'm sorry, the root is on the D string. Okay, right there. So the root is on the D string on the 7th fret. So because the root is on the D string 7th fret, even knowing that is harder for some people, but we'll get back to that near the very end of this video. We'll get back to that. Okay, now here comes the hard part. We're going to play this musically just like we did before. We're going to play musically, right? Get a groove going, and we'll start playing this. And that's all well and good. The same thing, play it musically, and we're playing in that pattern, and just being able to do that will make a big difference in terms of your getting that pattern down. Now there is one more thing. So we've got the getting the pattern down. One is visualizing that chord like I showed you. The second is being able to play it musically and drilling yourself musically, and the third is, and you're going to hate this part, for a week, at least a week, give up this other position. Don't play anything in that position at all. Just play stuff in this position. Just play stuff in that position and don't go into the other positions. Now, ultimately, you're going to want to be able to play both, but for a week at least, and sometimes it'll be a little bit more, maybe 2, you'll want to give up playing in those other positions. And that's it. So if you do that, you're going to be a monster on guitar. You're going to be a monster on this position, and it will take a couple of weeks. It'll take at least a week and maybe a couple, but you'll really have that position down. You'll be able to visualize it really easily, and you'll be able to move on to the other position. Now, something before we break up for today. Now, before we end today, I want to tell you one other thing, and that is one of the reasons why it's really important to get at least 2 positions under your belt is that you start to see that the end is really close. I hear lots of people say, oh, this whole idea of combining major and minor pentatonic, you learn the minor pentatonic, then you learn the major pentatonic, and then you do other stuff, you know, maybe the modes or whatever. Well, when you learn 2 positions, you're going to start to see that the minor pentatonic and the major pentatonic are really the same thing. They're just used over different harmony. So I'm going to show you how that's true, and then I'll answer any questions anybody has. Okay, so let's go on to that part. Now, we already talked about how this was the we had this shape right here. That's, some people call that pattern 1, and some people call this pattern 2. And then what's very confusing is when people learn the major pentatonic, then they'll call that like pattern 2 and pattern 3, and it just gets all confused. But clearly it's the same shape, right? So how can you reconcile that? Well, it's this same idea of putting in and visualizing the chord. So for the minor pentatonic, we had this A minor that's envisioned there, and this D minor shaped chord. It's an A minor with an E minor shape and an A minor with a D minor shape, right? And then we can also see that there's a G major chord shape. It's a C major chord, but it's a G shape in there, just like you were playing the open G, right? Embedded in that same thing. So the C major G shape is the same as the A minor E shape. It's the same notes. So this same formula will work over C major, or it'll work over A minor. And in fact, when you're visualizing the fretboard, when you're playing, you don't need to make the distinction. And that's going to be a huge advantage. Let me show you the next one too. We had this one, which was the D minor shape for the A minor. But when you think of it as C major, it's the same notes, but it's the E chord shape. You see that? And that's just hugely, hugely advantageous. It's just a huge advantage because you don't have to learn two sets of scales. You just learn one set of scales, but realize that you're applying them to different harmony. And so, honestly, this is the honest truth. When I'm playing in A minor, it doesn't matter where I'm playing on the neck, I actually think in terms of C major. No matter, I actually think in terms of the C major scale when I play wherever. And right? I'm playing all the C major. I'm playing the C major scale each of those times, and that's how I'm thinking about it. But it's just a different way of going about it. All right. I think that sort of idea, thinking about the embedded chord in the scale, is really the key to being able to not just memorize it, but being able to play fluently. And I'll give you one more, take a look at it and why I think that. One of the reasons is when you go to, like I can imagine doing these 5 pentatonic shapes, right? We have 1, we have 2, and there's 3 more. I can imagine doing that. But when you start to really kind of open it up and say, well, no, I want to look at all these things, all the arpeggios and the modes, and I want to know them for all keys and stuff, that's a lot of notes. However, when I navigate on the fretboard, I don't even use these when I move around. I use these. I use simple triads. And you can see that to move to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different places on the neck, all I have to do is think of 3 notes. And I can see those almost instantly. Now, if you want to know more about that, I've got a free resource. These are called triads, right? And you can see they're really easy to see once you get used to it. I've got a free resource that you can click in the description of the video where you can get it. And yeah, that's about it. But when I'm moving around the fretboard, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm mostly thinking about when I play. Okay, and that's it for today, folks. I don't see too many people on, so we will, and not too many people commenting. But if there are any questions, let me see if there are any questions. We'll see how many people are on. But I think that's going to be. We will call it a day today, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. See you later. Okay. Oh, it looks like somebody's on. Looks like Dan's on. And somebody telling me he has to do something. Let's get that out of there. Okay. Nobody needs to know stuff like that. All right. Well, I'm here to answer some questions if you've got any questions. But what I find is the hardest thing, I'll just mention this. What I find is the hardest thing to tell people to do and to get people to do is to give up on their main bread and butter for a week or two. But you got to do it. It's like learning a language. When you want to learn a language, it doesn't help to constantly be speaking, let's say English is your native language. If you're trying to learn Spanish, it doesn't help to constantly be speaking English anyway. So there you go. Hey, Dan. How you doing? Yeah, we're going to have a short one today, and only hammer-on legato technique. I have no idea what you're talking about. You can use whatever technique you want to with hammer-ons or pull-offs or legato, or you can pick every note. It's whatever you want to do. Understanding these scale positions has nothing to do with whether you're going to hammer on or pull off. Yeah, it's all good to use those extensions. And one of the things that's helpful is once you start adding, and I mean it's really, really good to add that whole position. Don't just use the extensions. The extensions are cool, but don't just do that, because once you add that second one, then you become fluent in moving between both the first and the second, and you start to see how this thing that everybody's talking about, like combining major and minor, like it's this big deal. It's not. It's just obvious, and it's not a hard thing to do at all. So there you go. I'm glad you're doing all right there, brother Dan. Yeah. The little 5-note shape at the bottom of box 2. I think, yeah, a lot of people call that the top because it's on the higher pitched note. But it's also on the bottom. There's all sorts of benefits of understanding this sort of thing, because, or being able to play it and it's not just visualizing. Let me give you an example of how there's something else that you can get from it, and that is one of the things that you learn is the sort of Jimmy Page lick, right? Or you learn how to play, that sort of thing, fast or slow or whatever, When it occurs in the second position, or in this D minor shape position, is on a different string. So your fingers are actually stretching a little bit differently to be you're stretching differently. So being able to play that and forcing yourself to do that is helpful. It may not feel the same as where you're doing it. It feels a little bit different. So one of the things I actually made my playing better in the regular position was this sort of idea. So that was something that I liked in this position because I started on it. So I'm playing the blue note by sliding down and back up. Right? Well, I don't usually start there on this position, but I sometimes go down. I can use that same idea, though, of sliding. So I often play that lick now. Or this idea of string skipping. You can apply that to this one. Apply that to there, or apply, force. And it just feels a little bit different. And there's other things that work better. There's fewer bends here, but if you don't take the time, you know, you're not going to find that sort of thing or that sort of thing, right? Or this, which doesn't really exist in position 1. You know, that kind of stuff. So anyway, Airway to Stephen. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah, I did that a long time ago. A long time ago. I used to call it Airway to Stephen. All right, folks. Thanks, Sawtooth. Yep. Yeah, good stuff. On the bottom 2 strings, and Musicians Live, again, most people, when they say the bottom, they mean the low E string and A string, right? Those are the bottom 2 strings. It's not the directional, it's the sonic, right? So it's sonic, the low end. But if you mean those strings, then those are usually referred to as the top strings. All right, folks, we will see you later, and hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you later.